Um, Billy, yesterday you mentioned a couple areas where you thought you guys could be better heading into tomorrow, specifically with the turnovers, just with the way Utah kind of plays with high hands and can clog up passing lanes. What can you all do from an execution standpoint to prevent those passes from getting deflected and everything?
Yeah, we've got to be sharper and crisper with our passes. We've got to put the ball where it needs to be when it needs to be there. I thought we had some opportunities where maybe we missed some chances to shoot the ball because maybe the pass wasn't where it needed to be. They've got obviously length. They're long. They're obviously a team that really does a good job of anticipating and can get out in passing lanes. And then I think for any team, when you turn the ball over, it puts the other team out in transition, and it's hard for any team to get back in transition after turnovers.
Paul, go ahead.
What was Paul able to do today, and what is his status?
He was not able to do very much today. He did some things in practice, but not much. We'll probably see where he's at after shoot-around tomorrow and probably evaluate him, going into the game.
Was he able to do contact stuff?
Mm-mm.
Did you guys go through contact stuff?
Yes.
What about Corey?
Corey did some contact and rested some. He did a little bit of both. So those were just kind of decisions the medical staff made, and I obviously trust those guys because the players are giving those guys feedback of how they're feeling. But Corey did some, and again, probably for him, we'll find out more, more after shoot around.
What's your level of concern with those guys, Paul in particular, about him playing?
I really don't know. I mean, I've got to, I think our staff's just trying to get prepared and ready to play, Utah. Paul's a tough guy, and he wants to be out there and playing. I don't think anybody this time of year's bodies ever feel, great. And, Paul wants to be out there, so I'm not going to, do anything more than to see where he's at tomorrow. Obviously we're never going to put a player's, health in risk in any way, and I don't think that's the case. But, I think part of the reason why he wanted to come out of the game the first time was he just didn't feel like he was moving well enough to help our team. So I think that's probably going to be a little bit more of his decision of, how he's feeling in terms of the way he's moving.
After the game, Paul said he was, out of the respect he has for you, is really looking forward to seeing kind of how you approach game 2 in terms of showing them things that might happen, kind of anticipating some adjustments that Utah might make. Obviously, you're not going to get into specifics, but just what's your process in trying to determine, okay, here's what happened in game 1, here's what we might see in game 2?
Yeah, I think there's always a balance there because I think you can speculate a lot of times what the other team may do or may not do, and I think sometimes you can overload players with things that may not even happen that you're trying to get them prepared for. So I mean, you're breaking down film on the offensive end of the floor, the defensive end of the floor. You're breaking down the film on timeout situations, both offensively and defensively. And then I think you're trying to do things that you need to adjust to, both offensively and defensively, that is going to have an impact in the game. And then I think you talk about things that, in a general sense, of what you need to be ready for. I think we've had 2 good days. There's a little bit of it's been unique here for these first 3 games because there's a couple days in between these games. There was 3 days leading up to game 1, 2 days to this game, 2 days to the next one. So, there's time to focus on yourselves and focus on them where it's not every other day.
Billy, what did you like about the way your team limited Utah's ball movement in Game 1, and what do you want to see improve going to Game 2?
Yeah, like I said after Game 1, I think we need to play better. We really do. We did some good things in the game, but we need to play at a higher level on both ends of the floor. Certainly we're happy we got the win, but it's one game. They're a very good team. They've been a consistent team on both ends of the floor all year long. But we need to play better, as a whole.
But I guess specifically with limiting their passes in terms of how they operate as an offense, what do you want to see improve in keeping them out of their comfort zone in Game 2?
Yeah, I mean, I think anytime you're guarding players that are very, very skilled, and they have a very skilled basketball team, they're a very good passing team, and they're a good handling team. And then obviously Gobert rolling to the basket is big and physical. So I think that you don't want to get into playing like just one-on-one matchups where you just want man-on-man. I think you've got to be in position that you're able to help. I think you've got to be in position where, you can get your length involved and get hands involved and be active with your hands, especially on passes that you can potentially deflect or disrupt. But I think anytime you're playing against a good passing team without fouling, you want to keep your hands up and try to have them as active as possible in terms of disrupting or even taking passes off target, where you're taking guys maybe out of rhythm shots. I thought that happened to us sometimes. Like they did a good job at times deflecting passes where we had some open shots. They also did a good job, I think, when we did, have a guy that was open, maybe we couldn't put it there exactly where it needed to be. So, so much of defense now is because of teams, the movement and the spacing is you have to have active hands to try to be disruptive.
Billy, you
What's
mentioned
the biggest key for a guy, whether it's Steven or Jeremy, in that short roll, getting better at making that pass to the corner?
I'm sorry, I missed the first part.
What's the biggest key in terms of a guy like Steven or Jeremy in that short roll when they receive the pass? What's the biggest key when it comes to them making that pass to the corner?
Well, I think the other thing, I think the big thing is generally when those guys are coming up into pick and roll, they're generally coming off the baseline, so they have a pretty if they're looking at what the floor, how the floor is balanced as they're going into a pick and roll, they're generally going to have an idea of where rotations are coming from, and they have an idea of where they need to roll, where may be open, in some pockets, and then once they find them, they've got to turn and locate the defense, the rim, and then they've got to be able to make quick decisions. I thought Jeremy did a good job several times of, finding Alex, for some threes. Steven's gotten, I think, much better from my first year to now of doing that, of catching it. Some of it has to do with where you catch the ball. It's really difficult to make those passes, when you're on top of the basket. It's a lot easier if you're catching the ball at the free throw line a little bit below, where you have time to face up and maybe put the ball on the floor or get it to the second side.
Well, you mentioned Gobert is a big physical guy rolling. They have a reputation kind of as a physical team. In what ways kind of are they physical? What ways does their physicality present challenges?
Well, they're playing with two big guys, obviously, with Favors and Gobert. They've got they're long at positions. Ingles is a long, small forward. Donovan Mitchell's a strong physical guard. Rubio's a guy that's got length. So they're a team that I think naturally and athletically, can be physical and disruptive and get into passing lanes.
Is that a way you guys want to play as well? I mean, do you feel like you're a physical team?
Yeah, I mean, you don't want to. I think in all this, you don't want to. The free throw line is such a big priority that you can be to a point where you're physical, where you're fouling and you're giving up free throws. So I think there's a level of smarts. I think the word physicality gets used in a way that sometimes people think it's just like guys banging into each other. Some of it is just like really getting over screens, legally and physically getting over it, trying to avoid being screened. Some of it's, running back in transition and being able to get into spots, where you can absorb drives. Some of it is there's a pick and roll and someone's rolling to the basket, of being there to provide help. Those are the physical things. I think sometimes people see the physicality, they think like there's just pushing and shoving going on. But you got to be physical in terms of what you're doing defensively. I don't think that's any different than any time during an 82-game schedule. Where you have to be physical. If you let teams if you die on screens, if you die in transition, if you die in pick and roll coverage, it's really hard to be good defensively. You've got to be able to get over those things and do those things at a high level.
Donovan Mitchell said yesterday he saw a difference between regular season Russ and playoff Russ, regular season Paul George, playoff Paul George. What are you looking for? What did you see the difference between those two guys, or just your team in general, playoffs, regular season, just in that game one?
Yeah, I don't know if I necessarily saw anything different from those two guys. I think Russell's always the same. I mean, I think he.
But just your team as a whole. I mean, he was talking about the team. It was a difference, and I guess being a rookie.
Well, one is I think I have a great level of appreciation and respect for our fans, for the environment that they create in our arena. It's one of the best in the league. And then obviously when you're playing well, it gives them an opportunity to even be better than they are. And we've got to obviously play well. But every game I feel like our fans do an incredible job of raising the level of our team and their energy and those kind of things. And that's, I think, a great positive for us. They can't play for us. We've got to go out there and play. So, maybe from a crowd standpoint, it was amped up maybe a little bit more because it was the playoffs. I thought our guys were focused. It was game one. I think for any team, there's always going to be a heightened sense of, the postseason's here. I think for every team, I didn't see anything like drastically different from our team. I just felt like our team was ready to play. I thought their team was ready to play too. And I think you could tell their team was ready to play just based on the way the score was. It's 16-4 to start the game. So I thought both teams came in, ready to play and, battled for the full 48 minutes.
Really, whether it's Gobert, Favors, even Udo, like they're capable of having someone who can protect the rim on the floor at all times.
Mhm.
Does that make jump shooting, like not necessarily even making shots, but being able to create quality jump shots, is that more important against a defense like Utah?
Well, I think it's an important quality against any team. You want to be able to create good shots, and it depends on what the defense is taking away from you. If the team's taking away, the deep paint, then you got to be able to make decisions to the perimeter to try to generate, extra pass shots. I think if teams are, really taking away the three, you got to find ways to get into the deep paint and try to, get to the basket. I think, shot quality at this level is so important because of the level of talent and player in the NBA. So, generally what you're trying to do is you're trying to every possession get a really, really good quality shot. That's not going to happen, but for the most part you want to be able to get good quality shots. And then I think sometimes you get a player like Paul who was in a rhythm like he was in game one, made some tough shots. I think that's what guys like him do. But I think for us, that's why I was saying, like, we got to play better, because what happens if he doesn't shoot the ball at that level? That could very easily happen. And I just believe in these situations you got to really focus on the controllables. Like, what are the things that we have control over that we can do a better job with? But you want to generate good shots, and still you can generate really good shots and not make them. And that's kind of, you have to live with that sometimes. And I've seen different moments in time during the season with Paul that he's got on a groove like that. Where he's played like that, he's really, really gotten it going. It's unfortunate he's dealing with some of the things he's dealing with physically right now, considering that he came off the game he came off of. But we've got to focus on the things that we can control, and we can control generating good shots. So long and short of it, yes, we need to generate great shots, but we got to create great shots.
You've talked a lot in the past about, like, you're okay with long twos if they're good long twos, catch and shoot or open or whatever they might be.
There's a balance there with that.
Yeah,
in my
so you
opinion.
guys took like 20, 23 in the Utah game. Were you happy with the ones that you got?
Yeah, I mean, it's not so much the number that we take, it's the quality that we take. Like when Russell comes off in any situation, he's at the free throw line and he's got a clean jump shot. I like that. I like that all the time for him. Carmelo, if he comes off and he's in space in his spots and he's I like that. Same thing with Paul. If he's coming downhill and he's got space and he can get off a good shot, like, those are good shots for us. So I really don't necessarily put a limit on it, as much as I try to look at, okay, what kind of shots are we getting? Are these, is this a good shot? Are these the non-paint twos that any player or coach wants to get rid of are the non-paint twos that are highly contested and challenged. You're better off taking a challenge shot at the rim or a challenge shot from behind the line. But if you're getting clean, wide open threes, I mean 15, 18-foot jump shots with good players, I think that sometimes you have to take those.
So you were okay with the ones against?
Yeah, I mean, like any game, there's some I wish we had back. Yes, wish we had back. So if there was 23, maybe 18 were okay, and 5 we probably could have taken back. I'm just throwing that as a number. I'm not really sure if that's accurate, but yeah, I mean, there's always going to be every possession. You're gonna want to look at it and evaluate it, and what could we have done differently and better.
All been really strong offensively in April. Other than the obvious, which is that the ball's going in, what areas have you seen him improve the most during that span of time?
Well, one is, to his credit, when he was going through a little bit of that slump where he wasn't shooting the ball particularly well, one is that he really put extra work in. I felt like he was really driven and focused to work himself through it, which is, I think, the number one most important first step is that. And then I think Paul's got a lot of confidence and belief in himself, because he knows that even if his shot is not falling, he's got ability to impact the game defensively. And that's the one thing I've always respected and admired about him, is he has always been a guy that plays both ends of the floor. And sometimes when players don't have it going offensively, their defense suffers and the team defense suffers. It's not with him. He really prides himself on trying to play defense against anybody, not only one-on-one defense, but good collective defense. So I really have a great admiration, because even when he was going through that stretch coming out of the All-Star break where he wasn't shooting the ball particularly well, the guy was really guarding at a high level, and I think sometimes, I've said this before, there's so many stats in the NBA, sometimes the stats that aren't kept are the ones that impact and affect winning maybe the most. And I think he's a guy that impacts winning even when he's not making shots.
Billy, does the physical style that you all play with in the regular season, whether it's Russell getting downhill or Steven on the offensive glass, does that lend itself to playoff basketball? Well,
I think it lends itself to any time of year basketball. we certainly, for our perspective, don't want to give up offensive rebounds to Utah or any team, and certainly we don't want, teams just attacking the paint and attacking the rim and getting layups. So, I mean, Russell and Steven do that. My thing with those two statistics, or two guys doing what they're doing, I always ask myself, is that sustainable against the best teams? If we're getting shots at the rim and we're offensive rebounding, I think that's a sustainable, formula, that you can get good production from those two things.
How important was the last 3 games of the regular season where you got some big wins? Maybe carrying in and translating into your performance in game 1, especially specifically getting all 3 of your scores kind of in sync and playing well at the same time.
Yeah, I mean, I thought we had a great test coming down the stretch, and those teams always responded. Every team has what I call a struggle or a mountain to climb for them to become the best version of themselves. Like, it's never smooth sailing for any team. There's always some kind of struggle. One of our struggles had been the consistency part. That was something that we had to bear and we had to deal with and we had to try to resolve and figure out. But the one thing that they do great is they respond, and that's a great quality as well. We've responded in a lot of ways. So, to your point, going into the last week or 10 days, not even knowing, if we'd be even in the playoffs, they responded and they put together 3 good games to close the season out. But we were consistent on offense and defense. I thought we played at a really high level, a sustainable level of basketball. Like I said, I thought we did some really good things in the game against Utah. We need to be better, but that's what you want this time of year. Is there going to be consistencies? There's some teams that don't respond, and when you're in the playoffs, you cannot not respond. You have to respond. There's going to be adversity. So everybody's got, like, as a team, they have different things they have to deal with, and that's been our part, is the consistency part. And when we have played consistent basketball, that's when we're at our best.
Anybody else?
Thank you, Ben.
Thanks, Coach.